I had a sudden inspiration.
Where is Scudder's book? Quick, man. I remember something in it.
The 39 steps.
Well,
39 steps.
39 steps. 39 steps. I counted them. High tide, 10:17 p.m. What?
The Admiralty man was looking at me as if he thought I had gone mad.
You see, it's a clue. Scudder knew where these fellows laired. He knew where they were going to leave the country, though he kept the name to himself. Tomorrow was the day, and it was some place where high tide was at 10:17.
But they may have gone tonight.
Not they. They have their own snug, secret way, and they won't be hurried. I know Germans, and they're mad about working to a plan. Where the devil can I get a book of tide tables?
Whittaker brightened up.
Chance. Let's go over to the Admiralty.
To the Admiralty! Batman. The Batman cut. We got into two of the waiting motor cars. Sir Walter went off to Scotland Yard to mobilise McGillivray. Heading up to the Admiralty. Quite close to Scotland Yard, if memory serves. From where we went last time to get to Scotland Yard. Into the Admiralty. Right, so we've got to find these tide tables. Find 1017 high tide. A resident clerk was unearthed, who presently fetched from the library the Admiralty tide tables. So, right. Tide tables, what was it? 1017's high tide? 10:17 p.m. I sat at the desk, and the others stood round, for somehow or other I had gotten charge of this expedition. But it was no good. As far as I could see, 1017 might cover 50 places. We had to find some way of narrowing the possibilities. There must be some way of reading this riddle. The riddle. The steps. What did Scudder mean by steps? If it were dock steps, why mention the number? It must be some place with several staircases, and one marked out from the others by having 39 steps. High tide. Why was high tide so important? It must be some little harbour, or no harbour at all. There are no sets of staircases on any harbour that I have seen. The place must be a bit of open coast. Germany. He's a man in a hurry. He wants a speedy and secret passage. They wouldn't travel by a big boat from a regular harbour. There is no regular steamer sailing at that hour. And also, well, and if it's Germany, you want it on the east coast as well. Which coast? I must put myself in the enemy's shoes. I wouldn't leave from the Channel to the west coast. Scotland is too far. I should try for Ostend or Antwerp or Rotterdam. I should sail from somewhere on the east coast between Cromer and Dover. So it's Dover, around there. Non-elementary. This is all guesswork. I'm no kind of Sherlock Holmes, but I do have a feeling about all of this. No time. Time is running out. 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 I set out all my conclusions on a bit of Admiralty paper. Fairly certain. 1. Place where there are several sets of stairs. One that matters, distinguished by having 39 steps. Full tide at 10:17 p.m, leaving shore only possible at full tide. Steps not dock steps, and so place probably not harbour. No regular night steamer at 10:17. Means of transport must be tramp, unlikely, yacht, or fishing boat. Guessed. Place not harbour but open coast. Boat small. Trawler, yacht, or launch. Place somewhere on the east coast between Cromer and Dover. Sir Walter had joined us, and presently McGillivray arrived. He had sent our instructions to watch the ports and railway stations for the 3 men whom I had described to Sir Walter. Not that he or anybody else thought that would do much good.
Here's the most I can make of it. We have got to find a place where there are several staircases down to the beach, one of which has 39 steps. I think it's a piece of open coast with biggish cliffs somewhere between the Wash and the Channel. Also, it's a place where full tide is at 10:17 tomorrow night.
Then an idea struck me.
Is there no inspector of coast guards or some fellow like that knows the east coast?
Why, yes, there is. He lives in Clapham. Let me get him now.
I think I've been to Clapham. Random aside. Right. He went off in a car to fetch him. I lit a pipe and went over the whole thing again till my brain grew weary. See? It's going to be a 3-pipe problem. I said that at the beginning. Oh, dear. About 1 in the morning, the Coast Guard man arrived. He was a fine old fellow with the look of a naval officer and was desperately respectful to the company.
This is the chap.
Good evening, gentlemen.
We want you to tell us the places you know on the East Coast where there are cliffs and where several sets of steps run down to the beach.
What kind of steps do you mean, sir? There are plenty of places with roads cut down through the cliffs, and most roads have a step or two in them. Or do you mean regular staircases, all steps, so to speak?
Whitaker looked towards me.
We mean regular staircases.
He reflected for a minute or two.
I don't know that I can think of any. Wait a second. There's a place in Norfolk, Brattlesham, beside a golf course, where there are a couple of staircases to let the gentleman get a lost ball.
That's not it.
Then there are plenty of marine parades, if that's what you mean. Every seaside resort has them.
I shook my head.
It's got to be more retired than that.
Well, gentlemen, I can't think of anywhere else. Of course, there's the Rough.
What's that?
The big chalk headland in Kent, close to Bradgate. It's got a lot of villas on the top, and some of the houses have staircases down to a private beach. It's a very high-toned sort of place, and the residents there like to keep by themselves.
Bradgate. High tide is at...
We're on the scent at last. How can I find out what is the tide at the Rough?
I can tell you that, sir. I once was let a house there in this very month, and I used to go out at night to the deep sea fishing. The tide's 10 minutes before Bradgate.
I closed the book and looked round at the company.
If one of those staircases has 39 steps, we have solved the mystery, gentlemen. I want the loan of your car, Sir Walter, and a map of the roads.
Of course.
If Mr. McGillivray will spare me 10 minutes,
Yes.
I think we can prepare something for tomorrow.
Good.
Yay!
I, for one, am content to leave the matter in Mr. Rene's hands.
Yay! It was ridiculous for me to take charge of the business like this, but they didn't seem to mind, and after all, I had been in the show from the start. Besides, I was used to rough jobs, and these eminent gentlemen were too clever not to see it. "39 steps. Counting. I knew my maths degree would pay off sometime. By 3:30 that morning, I was tearing past the moonlit hedgerows of Kent, with McGillivray's best man Scaife on the seat beside me. Ooh, 2 more to go. Onwards. Masters of Disguise. Monday, the 15th of June, 1914, Bradgate, Kent. So here we are. Ooh, there's a boat already. I'm guessing they're going to wait until high tide. And that's when they're going to pick up. So I'm guessing it's going to be go down to a beach where it's completely covered at that point. Random hotel. Why have we gone to a hotel? A pink and blue June morning found me at Bradgate, looking from the Griffin Hotel over a smooth sea. The lightship on the Cock Sands seemed the size of a bellboy. That's the red ship, I'm assuming. A couple of miles farther south and much nearer the shore, a small destroyer was anchored. That's the destroyer. Scaife had been in the Navy and knew the boat. He told me her name and her commanders, so I sent off a wire to Sir Walter. And then there's the lightship. The lightship on the coxswain seemed the size of a bellboy. Yes, we just heard that bit. After breakfast, Scaife got from a house agent a key for the gates of the staircases on the Rough. I walked with him along the sands and sat down in a nook on the cliffs while he investigated the half-dozen of them. I didn't want to be seen, but the place at this hour was quite deserted, and all the time I was on that beach I saw nothing but the seagulls. It took him more than an hour to do the job. Everything depended on my guess proving right. He read aloud the number of steps in the different staircases.
34, 35, 42, 47, and 21, where the cliffs get lower. Oh, and 39.
Scaife, we have them.
It's going to be something like it's the 42. I'm guessing, because this is how I would do it, and I know we've got another one after this, so I'm guessing it's the 42 one, or maybe the 47, because the high tide goes above. We hurried back to town and sent a wire to McGillivray. I wanted half a dozen men, and I directed them to divide themselves among different specified hotels. Then Scaife set out to prospect the house at the head of the 39 steps. He came back with news that both puzzled and reassured me. Right, the report. The house. The house was called Trafalgar Lodge and belonged to an old gentleman called Appleton, a retired stockbroker, the house agent said. Only 3 servants were kept, a cook, a parlour-maid and a housemaid. The cook was not the gossiping kind and pretty soon shut the door in his face, but Scaife said he was positive she knew nothing. The occupants. They were just the sort that you'd find in a respectable middle-class household. Mr. Appleton was there a good deal in the summer-time and was in residence now, had been for the better part of a week. Scaife could pick up very little information about him, except that he was a decent old fellow who paid his bills regularly and was always good for a fiver for a local charity. Neighbours. Next door there was a new house building which would give good cover for observation, and the villa on the other side was to let, and its garden was rough and shrubby. Done. I borrowed Scaife's telescope and before lunch went for a walk along the Rough. I wonder if he's going to realise. I say that as if I'm right, but I'm fairly sure. I kept well behind the rows of villas and found a good observation point on the edge of the golf course. 39 steps. Oh, okay, so maybe... I thought it was just cut into the rock, but if it's tunnel... maybe I'm wrong then. I observed someone leave the house and saunter along the cliff. I saw it was an old man, wearing white flannel trousers, a blue serge jacket and a straw hat. He carried field glasses and a newspaper. He sat down on one of the iron seats and began to read. Sometimes he would lay down the paper and turn his glasses on the sea. He looked for a long time at the destroyer. I watched the elderly man for half an hour, till he got up and went back to the house for his luncheon, when I returned to the hotel for mine. This decent commonplace dwelling was not what I had expected. The man might be the bald archaeologist of that horrible moorland farm, or he might not. He was exactly the kind of satisfied old bird you will find in every suburb and every holiday place. If you wanted a type of the perfectly harmless person, you would probably pitch on that. After lunch, I perked up, for I saw the thing I'd hoped for and had dreaded to miss. Ariadne. Her name was the Ariadne. Scaife said she was a fast boat for a build, and that she was pretty heavily engineered. Ariadne, I think she was... Scaife and I went down to the harbour and hired a boatman for an afternoon's fishing. At about 4 o'clock I made the boatman row us round the yacht, which lay like a delicate white bird, ready at a moment to flee. One of the men was polishing the brasswork. I spoke to him and got an answer in the soft dialect of Essex. Another hand that came along passed me the time of day in an unmistakable English tongue. Our boatman had an argument with one of them about the weather, and for a few minutes we lay on our oars close to the starboard bow. Then the men suddenly disregarded us and bent their heads to the work as an officer came along the deck. He was a pleasant, clean-looking young fellow, and he put a question to us about our fishing in very good English. But there could be no doubt about him. German. His close-cropped head and the cut of his collar and his tie never came out of England. I know Germans. In the hotel, I met the commander of the destroyer, to whom Scaife introduced me, and with whom I had few words. Then I thought I would put an hour or two watching Trafalgar Lodge. Tennis. They played with tremendous zest, like two city gents who wanted hard exercise to open their pores. They shouted and laughed and stopped for drinks when a maid brought out 2 tankards on a salver. You couldn't conceive a more innocent spectacle. I rubbed my eyes and asked myself if I was not the most immortal fool on earth. Mystery and darkness had hung about the men who hunted me over the Scotch moor in aeroplane and motor car, and notably about that infernal antiquarian. It was easy enough to connect those folk with the knife that pinned Scudder to the floor, and with fell designs on the world's peace. But here were 2 guileless citizens taking their innocuous exercise, and soon about to go indoors for a humdrum dinner, where they would talk of market prices and the latest cricket scores. The thing that worried me was the reflection that my enemies knew that I had gotten my knowledge from Scudder, and it was Scudder who had given me the clue to this place. If they knew that Scudder had this clue, would they not be certain to change their plans? I talked confidently last night about Germans always sticking to a scheme, but if they had any suspicions that I was on their track, they would be fools not to cover it. I had been making a net to catch vultures and falcons, and lo and behold, 2 plump thrushes had blundered into it. Presently a third figure arrived, a young man on a bicycle. He was welcomed riotously by the players.
You all right there, Percy?
Yes, you're looking a little hot under the collar.
I got into a proper lather. This'll bring down my weight and my handicap, Bob. I'll take you on tomorrow and give you a stroke a hole.
They all went into the house and left me feeling a precious idiot. I'd rather have walked into a den of anarchists, each with his Browning handy, or faced a charging lion with a pop gun, than enter that happy home of 3 cheerful Englishmen and tell them that their game was up. Not allowed to play golf. But then I remembered old Peter Pienaar. He was the best scout I ever knew, and before he had turned respectable, he had been pretty often on the windy side of the law. Peter once discussed with me the question of disguises, and he had a theory which struck me at the time. He said, barring absolute certainties like fingerprints, mere physical traits were very little use for identification if the fugitive really knew his business. The only thing that mattered was what Peter called atmosphere. Those chaps didn't need to act, they just turned a handle and passed into another life, which came as naturally to them as the first. Peter used to say that it was the big secret of all the famous criminals. This recollection gave me the first real comfort I had had that day. Peter had been a wise old bird, and these fellows I was after were about the pick of the aviary.